All right, everyone. So I hope you've got your drinks, your popcorn, your coffee, whatever else is going to, get us through this next 30 minutes. Hopefully you won't need it, because I'll keep you entertained enough. But my name is Cal, and thank you so much for joining on our webinar around achieving onboarding excellence. I can't promise you're going to be able to leave as an onboarding aficionado, but all I can do is share some of my nuggets and my pearls of wisdom or non-wisdom that I've acquired over my time at Mediazoo. So my name is Cal. If you call me Khalees, I think I'm in trouble, so definitely don't type that in the chats. And yes, I had started my role and my life really as a psychologist, my professional life in South Africa. I moved into the learning and development space when I came into the UK kind of over a decade ago, and have just really fallen in love with this idea of people's ability to change, their resilience, and the ability to take on new learning and new experiences if they can make meaning of that. I'm very passionate about understanding what that looks like from a measurements perspective, and then how we incorporate that into how we design really impactful learning, onboarding, transformation, and change experiences. So that's kind of where I am at. What are we going to talk about today in our time together? So I'm going to share some of my nuggets, why onboarding fails. This is not just my opinion. We've got a few kind of stats to back this up, and it'll be great to see, how familiar with those you are. We're then going to be looking at onboarding as a mutual journey. So what do we mean by this hourglass model? We'll be building competency and confidence when we're talking about our new starters and their journeys so far, and what it is that we can really do to amplify that to create impactful onboarding experiences. And then we're lifting the lid a little bit, getting under the hood of what do we do at Mediazoo to design our impactful onboarding. And through this time, I'll be sharing some anecdotes, some examples, and hopefully a few things you'll be able to take from it that maybe you hadn't thought about before, or even if there is something that sounds quite familiar, how could you reframe it in terms of the things that you know and understand or would want to do differently? And I'm sure we're all here with different perspectives in mind. So just really quickly, if you'd like to, I'd love to see in the chat, are you joining as somebody who runs onboardings yourself? Are you joining as somebody who designs them? Are you somebody who's recently gone through an experience? Let us know in the comments where we're all coming from today and why we're all here. Lovely. Thanks, AK. Designer in the house. A bit of all of those. Yeah, Ben, I definitely know you get your fingers in all those pies. Great. Yeah, global onboardings can be a little bit tricky. They are quite complex with all the cultural, considerations, but I think they're really, really rewarding when they're done right. That's great, Healy. Design, I love it. And design and support. Perfect. Great. Okay, so I think there'll be a little bit of something for everyone, whether you're the decision makers, the architects, the designers, or the client. There'll be something in here for all of you, and we'll definitely be having an opportunity at the end to answer any questions that you might have and get into some more detail if you don't feel it's kind of covered sufficiently enough. You're always also welcome to get hold of me via LinkedIn, and we can catch up afterwards if you'd like some more time. But let's dig in. So why this topic? Well, regardless of the way that the world is going and the rise of AI and tech and all of these things, that it hasn't changed really. I feel like we've been on this treadmill of change for a really long time. We'll always need new hires, and we'll always want them to be our big fans. We'll often, miss this as an opportunity to make that happen, because sometimes, onboarding, we do understand, is potentially seen as a bit of a tick box exercise, but really it can lay the foundation for an incredible interaction with our business and our brand. So let's talk a little bit about why onboarding fails, and we'll bring this to life with some statistics. So what percentage, quiz time for you, of employees do you think decide within the first 6 months that they want to leave? What percentage? Pop it in the chat. Let's take some guesses. What percentage of employees do you think decide that they want to leave within the first 6 months? 60, 40, 30, yeah, 80. Well, Claire, you are the closest, because a staggering 86% of new employees make the decision whether they're going to stay or leave within that first 6 months. And this is heavily impacted by that onboarding experience. What percentage of employees who leave within the first 30 days? What percentage is that? Take another guess. Diana, you hit the nail on the head. I'm not sure whether you saw my slides before I started presenting, but yes, this for me blew my mind when I saw the statistic that 30% of employees leave within the first 90 days. That is a huge amount of attrition, and that churn, depending on the scale of the organization, can really, really cost you. It costs you time, costs you money, costs you training. We know all of this, but it can potentially also cost you reputationally. So that's really important to consider. The percentage of employees likely to stay in the business for 3 years with a great onboarding experience. So we've seen the negative side. What do we think about the flip side? What percentage of employees do we think would stay in the business for 3 years with a great onboarding experience? 90, I would hope so. 75. Let's see, Healy, let's see what's going on. 69. Okay, so not as high as 90 or 75, but still very significant if you're thinking about this as an individual contributing factor. 69% of employees are more likely to stay in the business for up to 3 years with a great onboarding experience. And this is really to do as well with being able to harness kind of those group dynamics, creating a sense of belonging, and making sure that your new joiners feel as though they're part of your organization. They're being done with and not to. Obviously, that's correlated highly with engagement. And if they're engaged, more productive, if more productive, it's good for us, it's good for everybody else, really boosts the confidence. So when we're thinking of the final one, what percentage of productivity improvement do we think that there is? We've just spoken about engagement leading to increased productivity. What do we think that is? Yeah, close, Craig, very close. Right in the middle of Diana and Craig, it's 70%. So that is a significant amount of productivity that we can say increase as a direct result of a great onboarding experience. But if this is the magic bullet and we really think that it has all of this potential, which isn't just a thought, it's backed up by the research, what do you think some of the common pitfalls are in onboarding? What are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing? So let me know. What do you think is getting in the way of great onboarding experiences? Long emails. Well, lots of to-do tasks. Yes, absolutely. Were you in my onboarding about 10 years ago in my previous organization? Yeah, cohesion, absolutely. Training time overload and knowledge dump, not enough scaffolding. Yeah, absolutely. No clear direction. Oh gosh, this is music to my ears because it means it's validating a lot of the content we'll be covering in a little bit. That's great. So yes, absolutely, all of these things. And I think a big part of this is lack of engagement, right? Lack of really understanding what it is that our learners need, what the behaviors are that we're trying to shape and change. That would be able to inform a lot of this design and some of, the things that make it a bit more bulky and overwhelming. There's a one size fits all approach. We generally treat everybody who's coming in with the same onboarding brush, and that might need a bit of nuance and a bit of difference and a why that's specific for each type of person, because we all have our own reasons and motivations for coming to work. And then, as we discussed in the chat, misalignment sometimes with business needs, So what is the business asking for? What do they need? What's the time and role? How quickly do they want speed to competency versus who is coming on board and why do they want to be there and what do they want to get out of that working relationship? And I think this is really important because it talks about how fundamental the mutuality is of an onboarding experience. So we really need to start seeing it as a mutual journey. So the hourglass model is just what we've spoken about, where employees and businesses meet in the middle to create a seamless and mutually beneficial process. And, often, obviously, as a business, you're interested in getting people up to scratch quickly. You want to get them up to skill so that they can really start adding value to the organization, because with all the best will in the world, we can have passion, we can have power, vision, and purpose, but we also do need to be commercially viable. We need to make some money. So it's fair to assume then that the power balance lies in the favor of the business. But a thought here: what if we treat our new joiners as our customers? What if we think of them as having to buy us, right? As wanting to do good work for us. So just like customers, we invest tons into marketing, into messaging, into making sure that what they're receiving feels like it's a fit for them. We also spend a lot of time giving the floor to our customers, asking them, what did you like? What didn't you like? What could we do differently? We really service our customers. And I think this is a great opportunity to treat new joiners as our customers, roll out the red carpet. So one of the things that I've done in the programs I've designed is creating opportunities for radical candor. So, for instance, sounds a bit quirky, but we all wrap up our roles and we have exit interviews. Why do we have them at the end? They're so valuable. So, if we can start normalizing a culture where we're having exit interviews at the start and at various touch points in the middle, this really allows them to start understanding that there's a feedback culture, that we can express openly and honestly. It builds a level of psychological safety, and it gives you really valuable insights into how you're building your programs and what you can improve. And this is really great as long as you can also evidence that you are actually incorporating some of that feedback. And even if it isn't within their onboarding journey specifically, get back to the cohort, in 6 months, a year's time, and say, based on your feedback and the things that you suggested, we are now doing this with our new starters. So you're getting them really built in and invested as part of that organization. On the other side, with regards to the business, you need to be crystal clear about what your expectations are of them and what they can expect if those expectations aren't met. So often, we'd expect that within X amount of weeks, they're going to be competent, they're going to be on the phone, selling the products, doing the job. But they don't necessarily have a very clear overview of what that journey looks like and where their touch points are for support, for feedback, and for escalation. So we need to be very, very clear what our expectations are as employers too, because then that allows us to have very transparent and open conversations about performance, which put us in the growth mindset rather than in any type of defensiveness, which works really well. So what we do know is that where there is alignment, this reduces friction. And you mentioned this a lot within your chat earlier when we spoke about the things that go wrong with onboarding experiences. And friction is the death of a good onboarding experience. Said by a very wise person. No, I'm joking. It's just me. I thought about this. I thought it sounded really punchy. I couldn't put it on a t-shirt, so I put it on a slide. It really is the case, but this isn't always possible. So how, we know we've all got clunky processes. There's always things that potentially aren't going to contribute to, the world's most seamless onboarding experience. So what do we do about it? Well, if we can't avoid the friction, what we can do is build competence and build confidence. That is the absolute fundamentals of any onboarding journey. And this links again to some of the points that you had mentioned earlier around what makes them not so great. So the first thing that we really like to talk about is scaffolding and early exposure. Traditionally, we would think of kind of skills development as linear. Let's get them comfortable. Let's get them in the right mindset. Let's build their confidence. Let's introduce them to things a little bit by little bit, and then we'll ramp up in terms of, the real world application, skills practice. And there's a time and a place for that, definitely. But one of the things that we found works really well is this idea of early exposure and through scaffolding, this process of support, right? So we all have those pesky process gremlins in our organizations. Is it your legacy tech systems that aren't working, that are all like clunky and chunked together? Is it the 15 disconnected processes to apply for leave versus, I don't know, being able to claim expenses? Is it the 6 tools to do the one job that every team uses a little bit differently, or the silos that don't talk, the bulky LMS? Give me a thumbs up or a heart in the comments if any of this applies to any of you, because that's what we see with organizations time and time and time again. But whatever it is, it's okay, because as long as you're including it in the design up front and intentionally, you're exposing them to it and you're designing for resilience. I'll give you an example. We are working with a financial client, and they have a product that they need to sell, and they want to kind of, obviously onboard a cohort of their advisors. And the systems are just really, really difficult. And they had that quite to the middle, to the end of their onboarding program. And I said, no, let's just bring it forward and normalize it. Let's start coupling this idea of like the difficult tech with some exercises and growth mindset. Let's gamify it a little bit so that we can start turning the challenge into an opportunity. And then let's create some social learning around this so that when there are things that somebody doesn't know, they can call on the alumni or they can share nuggets with each other, which are then celebrated in the wider cohort. So we're reinforcing the behaviors around problem solving and building that resilience really early on with some of those systems that might be tricky, but then their confidence is higher, the level of tolerance is higher, and then when they're actually moving into the practical application of it, that fear is a little bit lower. So another important thing is to think about parking in the stretch zone. So when we're thinking about more complex skills, that you would hope your new starters are able to take on. Obviously, research supports that activities in the stretch zone early, but with support, coaching, and wraparound care, significantly boost confidence and it promotes personal growth, which is strongly correlated with engagement. And at the end of the day, it's good for business, but it's also just good for everybody. We all want to feel good about our jobs at the end of the day. So to do this, we have to really break that fear barrier early. And that means if you're a business that is selling things, if you're a business that's doing things, get them doing the doing on the systems that might not be systeming sooner rather than later. And we do this by using different tools. A lot of us fundamentally and historically would probably have used role plays and case studies and scenarios, which is really, really great. Maybe it's like, hopping on the phones at the contact centers, maybe listening to some recordings, watching kind of alumni demonstrated for us. Maybe you've got some really cool box sets and films. But one of the things that we like to use at Mediazoo, and I'll introduce it to you now, is a tool that we've developed that helps with kind of conversational excellence. And it just really creates a simulated and safe environment to build that psychological safety before needing to do the real deal in order to kind of break that fear barrier. So let me just share this tool with you. Give me one sec. Right. So here's an example. It doesn't have to be ours. It could just be something like this, but this is Convex. It stands for Conversational Excellence. And here you can imagine kind of any conversation that you would want to have. Either you want your new starters to have conversations with customers, with colleagues, with clients, maybe they're consulting, or you would want your own managers, coaches, or, peer support workers to be able to provide really good feedback to your new joiners. Either way, it's important that everybody feels upskilled with an opportunity to do that. I'm going to give you an example. Just let me know if you can. Hopefully you'd be able to hear the vocal. Hi, Eleanor. How are you today?
Oh, hello there. I'm all right. Thank you. Just trying to get through this mountain of paperwork. How about you?
I'm all right, thanks. I don't want to bother you any further, but I heard that unfortunately one of our products wasn't up to scratch. I think it was the scented candles. Could you tell me a bit more about that?
Oh, yes, the candles. It's a bit of a shame, really. We've had a few returns on those, and apparently there's been some, well, let's just say some customers haven't been entirely happy with the scent.
Oh, okay. So it's the scent. Is there anything else that we need to know about the quality of the product?
Well, it's not just the scent, it seems. Some customers have mentioned that the candles are a bit unevenly burned. Like they're not burning down properly. It's a bit of a mess, really.
Okay. Well, Eleanor, I think that you should tell them that they should take better care of their candles. There isn't much that we can do for you, unfortunately, since you already bought them. But I really wish you luck in selling the rest of your stock.
Well, I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm not sure I agree with that. It's not really about how customers are taking care of them. It's about the quality of the product itself.
Don't get sassy.
And I'm not sure how much luck I'll have selling the rest of the stock.
All right.
Sassy.
All right. So obviously it was just putting on my best customer service hat so you can see a little bit of what was going down there. I really don't speak to my customers like that, I promise, but I just wanted to show you what we're able to do. So once we've got the chat with Eleanor, kind of you can go through some of those open-ended questions. Obviously, you can imagine that being any person with any problem with any prompt, and you can change the degree of difficulty of that interaction. So we had the chat, and then if we go into the coach function, we can then get some breakdown on how we performed. So I've got some feedback from the coach on my greeting. I established good rapport. I began to address the issues clearly. However, I should clarify the structure of my conversation. And right at the end, I was very dismissive. You didn't address the customer's loyalty, concerns, or frustration effectively, and this could alienate the customer. And then when I told her to not get sassy, she reacted poorly to the agent's differing opinion, demonstrating a lack of emotional control and understanding. So that's just an example of, a tool that you'd be able to use in order to stop that fear barrier from creeping up really early within the role, providing a safe opportunity to practice, to build that confidence, so that the seamless integration into those real world activities really, really does help in terms of that skill development for that more complex piece. So give me one sec. Back to my presentation. Bear with. There we go. There are many ways, as we've spoken about, that we can, really start building that competence and confidence. And I think, just to kind of sum it up, get the friction points, acknowledge what they are, but intentionally design them into the session early. Make sure that you're constantly challenging and providing stretch opportunities, because that will set the narrative. It provides the confidence and reinforces that support. Give opportunities for psychological safety and for practicing those real skills to remove those fear barriers. And last but not least, it's really important to flip the classroom. A lot of onboarding programs spend a lot of time when we are together doing digital modules or reading through things rather than really taking advantage of when we do come together. So spend time giving learners bite-sized specific things that they can do within their learner pathway and think about and engage with, so that when you are together, you can get them to apply it, to challenge it, to pull it apart, and they can receive coaching on it, and also peer learning and peer support when they're playing and feeding that back with each other, which is just going to amplify that group dynamics and that psychological safety, which we know is essential. If somebody feels really connected to their cohort, it means they're more likely to feel connected to the role. If they feel more connected to the role, they're more likely to weather out those turbulent storms and those patches. So I would just want to ask you here, I've been speaking at you for a lot. So what is one non-negotiable you think should be included in the design of onboarding programs? It would be great if you could put that in the chat. What is one non-negotiable that you think should always be included in the design of onboarding programs? Yes, absolutely, Darren. Socialization is essential. We need to be creating and maintaining those relationships. Yeah, very clear learner journey. We found that makes such a difference. Absolutely. Yeah, a buddy and a mentor, absolutely. Like so valuable. Potentially someone who's already in role, maybe a fellow new joiner, and setting very clear expectations on both behalves. Absolutely. So let's see if I'd be able to kind of capture some of those sentiments in some of the steps that we have here, or potentially add to what you already know. So the first thing that we need to think about with designing impactful onboarding journeys is they happen way before the first day ever starts. So really think about what your golden thread is that runs from the first interaction with your brand. What does it look like on LinkedIn? How are they finding you on Indeed, on social media? What are you saying? What is your brand saying about you in the market? What is the impression that they have of you? This runs all the way through your recruitment process. Was it honest? Was it fair? Did they receive feedback? Was it timeous? Was it smooth? How much friction was there? So really just thinking about, what is this experience? Are you able to set them up for success before their first day that they join? Can you share something really evocative with them, a message from their manager, a manifesto about the vision and purpose of the business, something to really bring it to life and get them excited about joining? And before their first day, is there anything you can get them to set up before they need to be in the room together, so you're not spending your first half day going through mandatory learning and getting tech set up? Are there any ways that you could potentially reimagine how that works, so that when they are together for the first time, they're really, really having the most incredible time and experience as that first touch point? So really think about what success looks like before the first day. And one of the things that we had I'd worked with on a previous client is, even with smaller businesses where you might not have these really fancy HR onboarding processes or anything which like automatically syncs messages from texts and from recruiters and then messages from line managers and preferential learning, etc. You can completely integrate that. There are tools out there like Zapier or If This Then That can create really seamless triggered workflows that if your new starter opens this form, then they are sent a link which takes them to another place. You can completely create, an immersive experience for them without needing an entirely new tool, and just being really smart about how you link together the existing tools and technologies that you do have. So it's definitely worth lifting the lid on that to see what that experience and how it's landing before they arrive with you on their first day. What else is really important to do is understand their needs as well as the behaviors. So we need to understand the intersection of business needs. Like obviously we've spoken about speed to competency, lack of attrition, all of those big, beautiful things. But we also really need to think about the managers. So often our line managers are really kind of in the most tricky positions within our organizations. They have a lot of downward pressure from the leaders at the top, but they have a lot of upward pressure from people that they're managing. And sometimes they're empowered to make those choices, but sometimes they feel a little bit stuck in those places. But because of that position, they have so much knowledge and insight about what's happening at an organizational level, and are often a very untapped voice, and can either be the success or the failing of your team, of your business, your new product, of rollouts, of any changes that are happening, of building that mindset. So they are crucial. Be sure you are understanding what your manager's needs are too, because that will give you a lot of insight about how you develop your onboarding experiences. And then obviously, last but not least, you need to think about your new joiners. So maybe speaking to new joiners from previous processes, doing something which is just a call out onto LinkedIn, and doing a little bit of kind of passive research, just finding out what you think people really need. And beyond that, what are the behaviors? So it's not just what are the needs and the preferences and how you can incorporate that potentially in the design, but what do we need to see them doing? Okay, so what behaviors are evidencing are an evidence that great onboarding is taking place? So you need to start thinking, how do we measure, versus just somebody is like giving me a thumbs up in an onboarding survey. What are the metrics that we're seeing shifting which show us that the onboarding is good? So is there improvement in workforce surveys? That's often the first place to start. Even better than that, if you've got qualitative data, you can do something called a sentiment analysis, where you start pulling out some of the themes which are telling you about whether that's working or not. Is there an uptake in self-led learning, showing that there's initiative and curiosity and motivation, which will only be sparked if they're engaged? Is there improved customer NPS? Are they doing better when they're joining than some of their previous cohorts, which we have seen before and we'll speak to? Are there greater levels of single point of contact resolution? This is an example, from a project we worked with. They really wanted to empower ownership and accountability rather than people being a little bit scared and saying, I don't know how to deal with this, I'm going to hand it over. When they're dealing with the customers, are they seeing that? Are they taking it, owning it, and finishing it, even if it's not the most comfortable thing for them to do? But there is that single points of contact resolution. That's a really good behavioral metric to understand whether your design of your onboarding is doing its job. And how are they demonstrating accountability and providing feedback? So those are all very crucial to understand. It's really important within all of this, and I think this has come through probably tacitly in the messaging. You really need to be human-centered. This is about providing a safe environment. We've spoken about the socialization, practice, coaching, buddying, mentoring, support. It's all about the human who's at the middle, so that when they are applying that knowledge, they feel permission to get it wrong, and they feel supported in getting it right. And that's really going to entrench some of those really fundamental kind of skill acquisition points and that learning point, especially when it comes to something that requires a lot more technical information. You want to get them to fall in love with their colleagues, not literally. That could be a bit of a workplace nightmare, but you really want them to have a lot of joy coming to their organization, because how many of us have said, I'm not here for the business, I'm here for the people. So that really is a fundamental kind of design lever that you would be able to use to enhance your onboarding experience. The next thing that we should be thinking about is thinking about innovation, right? Like reframing this notion of innovation. I just showed you a really fancy AI tool that we've been working on and building. And yes, it's great, and it does the job. And it does the job well, but there are different ways, as I've touched on, that we can think about things that we already have in our own environments. So if you truly understand needs and behaviors, this can be reflected. I'll give you an example. So again, we worked with clients, and what we found here was that an interactive PDF was going to be way more effective than a digital fancy solution. And why? Well, they wanted people to take more accountability. They wanted to see the working out, and they wanted to capture the reflections of these people as they're moving through their onboarding experience. So what we did was we created a PDF which had a very clear learner journey at the front and signposted both to the person and to the manager what was happening. And that was hyperlinked to the right places within the PDF so that they didn't have to scroll and scroll and scroll to find it. And after each key session, week, module, whatever else it was, after they had that flipped classroom experience, we asked them to, on them by themselves, write reflections, answer some key questions, and identify areas for development or that they would want to bring into their coaching conversations. So this was twofold. And the reason this was innovative is, one, it allowed the organization to give them a chance to reflect and apply the learning in a way that suited them. But secondly, so that created the personalized, impact and removed the one-size-fits-all approach. That also meant that they could have more targeted and specific coaching conversations and management support. But secondly, another part of innovation is that you could use it in more than one way. So the tool was a reflection tool, but what it also did, it was a signaler when we're thinking about the behaviors, when the leadership were looking at the whole cohort, what percentage of people were actually proactively filling it in? Who was doing the reflections? Who was bringing the topics into their coaching conversations? It provided a really clear snapshot of the level of proactivity, of the level of motivation, and the level of engagement. Then as a business, you have a choice. You can decide, there is somebody here who's extremely disengaged, who hasn't been doing anything. They're just along for the ride. Let me make the decision to end their job early. We're not going to take them through the rest of onboarding. We're going to save ourselves at least 3 months worth of salary, money, and retraining someone else. So that's decision A. You can decide to pivot with specific individuals if you're understanding their level of engagement isn't matching what your expectations are. Option B is that you can look at that and go, let's understand the why. Is there something else that we can do to provide more wraparound care and support for this person? Do they need more than we're actually giving? And then you can make the decision to learn from that and pivot and continue them in the direction of the onboarding. Either way, a simple PDF became a reflection tool for the individual. Think of that hourglass model, but it also almost became a diagnostic tool for the organization where they could start problem shooting a little bit earlier. So when we're thinking about innovation as doing something new, it doesn't have to be all sparkly and shiny. It can be something as simple as that, but you can use it in more than one way. And that's about, creating dual purpose assets, similarly to anything that you're doing in terms of an emotive film or a really cool icon or kind of the graphics or the brand design, wanting to make it feel a little bit sexy. Make sure that can also be used in other areas. Is that external facing? Can you use that across your socials? How do you encourage them to do that? So be quite clever about what it is you're giving them. Make sure it's of customer quality. We've spoken about this so that you can use it across other places too. It creates continuity, gives you more value for your money at the end of the day too. Media rich, story led, and blended. So we know this, right? Like we all have different learning styles. We all have different ways that we want to engage with content. And that's why it's so important, if we're thinking about kind of the behavioral psychology of it, that people have different ways that they can engage with the content. So everything should be really strongly story led. What's the why that's in it for them? It should feel and look really good. Doesn't have to be complicated, could be simple, but make sure that it's not clunky, make sure it's not overly complicated, make sure that it's something that people want to be looking at and consuming. And if you've got the budget, what are the films that you're using to tell those emotive stories of your customers or of your workforce? Also, it doesn't have to be. We did a series of TikToks where we got people working on the floor to give their top tips for avoiding or supporting specific behaviors through a really informal kind of TikTok type style, which then became quite popular within the internal kind of networking platform which they were using, which was Teams. And those were drawn out then for kind of reward and recognition and became part of kind of larger change and culture programs, which was really, really cool to see. So again, innovation doesn't always have to be the most expensive thing, but thinking cleverly about how you can use what you have. And then with the blended approach, of course, making sure that it's digital, face-to-face, classroom, giving an opportunity for that real world application to break that fear barrier. And as head of insights, I think it would be a little bit silly of me if I didn't say measure, refine, and repeat. This is very, very important so that you're always pivoting and you're reflecting that feedback within the work that you're doing. So just very quickly before we move on to our Q&A, this is how we brought together some of these elements for HSBC UK customer service. We won great awards with this, and subsequently over £1 million worth of business. It did really, really well. And that was because we just put the humans at the center. So essentially HSBC came to us and said, their contact center onboarding needs a bit of a refresh. We did what we said, and what I've been talking to you, we made it really story-based, did great films. As you can see here, this very clear learner journey that was at the top of the PDF. That created structure for both the managers and for the people who are going through that onboarding journey, provided an opportunity to engage with that content and have those reflection points. And what we did is we made it feel really specific to them as an audience. They are agents. It was an agent theme. How are they going to investigate? How are they going to own? How are they going to resolve? Because those were types of the elements that we wanted to create. It was based around a lot of cohorts, peer groups, and coaches. We did sprinkle a little bit of AI coaching in there so that we could reduce that fear barrier. And what ended up happening as a result, and that's it, to relationships and buddy expectations. And as a result, our new recruits, well, I say our HSBC's new recruits, were as good as the experienced operators within just 7 weeks. There was a 20% increase in speed to competency. This is not on the slide, but there was a 30% reduction on the amount of time spent online in terms of digital learning versus actually applying those skills. The actual learners said that 97% of them approved that the learning was sufficient so that they could go online and do their role. And if you think back to right at the beginning of the session, over 70% of employees said that they didn't feel equipped to be able to do the job post onboarding. And there was a 50% increase in core skill quality. And what this shows us is these are the business metrics, but by focusing on the human, by bringing great storytelling into the mix, by building in kind of that social element and breaking that fear barrier by having them do things sooner, we can really drive impact not only for individuals, but for the businesses that they work for. And this is all, up for grabs. This is absolutely something that is not within the realms of just an agency that does this for clients all the time. The tidbits that I've given you and pointers can easily, be implemented. And if you do any of them, you're going to enhance the impact of your current onboarding design. So this is me. I hope you've enjoyed what I've had to share, and whether there've been any kind of lessons or key takeaways, I'd love to hear from you. But let's have questions. I think we've got a bit of time. So I'd love to hear if anybody has anything that they'd like to know a little bit more about, and I'd be happy to have them here in the chat. This is that awkward time where you're like the news anchor waiting for somebody to respond on the other side. Sorry, the signal's not working. Right, that's fine. If we don't have any specific questions at this time, please do feel free to get in touch. I would absolutely love to connect with you. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can, kind of get hold of any of us really through the transformation team via Mediazoo, and we would be more than happy to have a chat with you at any point.